Hello, this month I wanted to offer a admittedly opinionated version of what constitutes a good connector, Node-RED or designer connector, in my estimation. So looking at the editor component of a connector, meaning the user interface that we interact with, Uh, the key for me is to have really great data validation in whatever fields you have. If there's data that is not allowed or that will cause trouble, to validate for it and to actually mark it appropriately. And you can use the validated function of the nodes, but if there's a more complex widget that you're using, then this validation could be done by adding or removing the input error class. And whenever there is a UI component that has that class, if you close the node sidebar, then you will get the little red triangle that indicates there is something wrong with the configuration. So this is, to me, it's key because it allows the user to know that what he or she has configured is correct, and there are no surprises once the flow is deployed and data starts flowing through the connector. Another idea is to also use popovers. Sometimes just the input error class just gives you a red bounding box around the element that is invalid. But if you can use popover to give some indication why it's what the error is, then obviously better. The second point I wanted to make is that I think configuration nodes obviously are great and necessary, but I would try to put as little configuration information there as possible, because it's much easier to and better for the customer and or for the user to have as much control in the node itself. No, I mean in the node that are using, saying a database node and like a database in or database out, rather than on the configuration node. They're easier to override, they're easier to debug, etc. So obviously there's things that have to be in a configuration node, but do not overdo it. Third point is internationalization. Even if it's just one language that you're familiar with, using the red underscore API with the locale, the JSON file that's in locale directory, even if it's one language, it just makes it a lot easier if it's an open source connector for other people to contribute other languages. And if it's a commercial proprietary connector, then if you get a customer that's in a different continent or has a different mother tongue than you, then it's much faster to add a language than to at that point go through every single string that is displayed to the user and trying to add internalization. It's kind of thing that where if it's much less painful if you do it from day one than if you want to retrofit it. And then fourth and fifth points are kind of related. Document everything so that, and even for yourself, when connectors get complex, one can lose sight of all the options or how exactly things work when you select different things in the UI. So even for yourself, it's really good to have documentation, and you can look at the stock or the notes that Node-RED provides as good examples of documentation, and you can use the CSS classes that are used in those, not just CSS classes, sorry, the HTML that is used in those, 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 the HTML that is in the documentation of those nodes as a good reference. And it's not that hard. So you only need to know a few things in Markdown / HTML that will get you very far in producing good looking and good quality documentation. And finally, examples. I think that's part of what the scorecard is. If you add open source node to the Node-RED directory, and for good reason, I think it's much easier sometimes to understand how something works when you see a properly and thought out example rather than trying to bang against your head against the wall, trying to figure something out. So that's sort of on the editor side. And again, this is what the user sees most of the time. But of course, the key part is the data processing that the node implements. And that's the runtime part of the node. First and foremost, you still have to validate the configuration. Why? Because as you know, in Designer or in Node-RED, a user can have an invalid configuration and still deploy. So it's paramount to validate that configuration again and generate appropriate error messages or warnings to let the user know if there's a problem. Something that I really, really, really like is to be able to override pretty much anything on the configuration that you select with the in the UI with messages. This allows for incredibly powerful dynamic programming. Like you can change many things, and a lot of the nodes implement some of it for some fields. I personally try to do it for pretty much every field that there is. There might be situations where you think that you'll never need it, but when you need it, it's really helpful to have. And again, it unlocks a tremendous power in dynamic programming. The third one, really, really critical. Please, no unhandled exceptions. That can either crash Node-RED or can cause all sorts of problems. So at the very minimum, liberal use of try-catch is mandatory. The fourth one, this is something I like. I know that not all nodes, all connectors do this, but I really like to, if there's an error in the connector, and it doesn't have to be a business logic error. For example, if you are performing a query in the database and for some reason that query did not succeed, to not use node warn or node error, but essentially have a flag in the output message, emit a message out of the connector with a error flag or a property or message property that it's either Boolean or has an error message when there is an error, because that allows you to deal with the error right at the output of the connector with the whole context. Like if you can actually emit the input message with that error flag or error description, then the next node has all the information that it needs to handle the error properly. You can have the catch node, certainly as a fallback that you should always have, but having that context to me is key to at least try to handle the error gracefully and potentially retry or with all the information that you need to do a proper retry, or situations like that where you can do something intelligent to perhaps solve that error. The fifth point I want to make is the to exit gracefully, meaning particularly if you have a configuration node, usually it's because you have to open a connection to a database or to a service somewhere. You have a socket open. If that's the case, obviously you should have a node on close listener and terminate things as appropriate. Like if it's a database connection, maybe cancel the query, then terminate the connection, close any open sockets that you might have. But regardless of what the operation is, just have a timer so that if these things for some reason they're just not going to happen, you can time out, and then some of the times some services or some connections, you can close them, but you can also destroy them. So obviously you want to try to close them first, but after a certain timeout, you can destroy them, nuke them essentially, so that when Node-RED needs to stop the flow, it actually happens and you're not just hanging the whole process. Then same as in the editor internationalization, far easier to do it just one language from the get-go. It's a slight initial pain, but then it becomes routine, and it enables contributors or support for other customers much easier in the future. And finally, obviously, if you can have a test bench where you test all possible, or at least the scenarios they may think of, particularly this is helpful not just to test the happy nominal path, but situations where there are errors, to make sure that you actually generate the right error, the internalization is working, also, and those kind of things really increase the quality of the connector. Anyway, these are my thoughts. This is my opinion. Did I miss something? Disagree? Agree? Let me know in the comments below. And till next month, ciao.